Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the FLVC-IDN Summer 2020 Professional Development Webinar Series. I'm Tom Tu from Florida Virtual Campus. I'm your host for the webinar today. Thank you for joining us. The FLVC-IDN Instructional Designer Network is brought to you through the partnership with the State University System of Florida, Board of Governors, the Florida College System, and the Florida Virtual Campus. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the IDN listserv for news, announcements, updates, professional development opportunities, and career opportunities, as well as effective practices and rich resources shared by our wonderful IDN community members. The subscription is free for everyone. Did you quickly transition a traditional face-to-face laboratory course or lab component to online or remote modality this spring as part of the COVID-19 emergency response? How was that experience for you, for your faculty, and for your students? What lessons did you learn? If you need to do it again in the near future, what lab course design, components, and delivery strategies you want to keep? What are the things you would never try again in an online remote lab? We can ask ourselves so many questions like these ones when we are planning for a very different fall 2020 semester with the coronavirus-related new normals keep setting their records daily. It might be a good time for us to rethink our lab course experience and the possible course redesign by integrating some new strategies and resources, which are so critical to effective students' learning in these days. Please join me in welcoming a group of Florida's online education leaders, experts, and practitioners. Let me introduce them to you, and we will learn from them. I'll start with our first guest speaker and panelist, Mr. Bryan Biggers. Bryan, would you please say hi to the audience, please? Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Time out of your day to join us. My name is Bryan Biggers. I get to serve as the Assistant eLearning Director at Palm Beach Atlantic University, and I'm looking forward to talking science with you guys today.
Thank you, Bryan. Bryan will start our presentation shortly, but let me move on to our second guest speaker and panelist, Dr. Christine Brown. Christine.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Brown. I'm the AVP for Digital Learning with USF's Innovative Education, and looking forward to answering questions and showing you our stuff.
Thank you, Christine. We have Debra Sheridan-Brinkman with us today as well. Debra, would you please say hi to the audience? Thanks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Debra Sheridan-Brinkman. I'm the Director of Technology with Miami-Dade College's NBC Online, and I'm also one of the LMS system admins that supported the remote transition.
Thank you, Debra. We have Vicki Westergard. Vicki, please.
Thank you, Tom. I'm Vicki Westergard. I'm Executive Director of Instructional Design and Development at St. Petersburg College, and I'm very happy to be joining you all today.
Thank you, Vicki. Welcome, everybody, again. We will hear from Bryan regarding strategies for online and remote labs. So, Bryan, please go ahead. I'm running the slide for you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to everyone at the FLVC for putting this together, too. So in the spirit of faculty autonomy, academic freedom, meeting learning objectives, etc., we decided to let faculty determine what would best suit their own learning needs. And in discussing this with faculty, a theoretical framework emerged that paralleled Edgar Davis's controversial cone of experience, which you can see on the left side of watching, virtual experiments, and live experiments. As you can tell on the right side, there's so many factors that go into this, and this is just a partial list, but we didn't want to prescribe, but rather to give faculty options. With this approach, though, we did find that learning communities emerged and faculty supported each other throughout this change. On the next slide, we're going to get into the cone of experience. And the first one is watching. And watching is basically videos, pictures, that kind of thing. And it definitely serves a purpose, especially with introductions, lower level on the Bloom's taxonomy, pre-labs, accompanying the virtual labs, that kind of thing, or accompanying the live experiments. But it definitely begs the question of, is this really a lab? There's a lot of pre-existing videos out there. There were a bunch of questions about open educational resources, OER. There's a lot of good videos out there that you can use for this too. But we were able to do some video recording where we did it like a cooking show, basically, was kind of like our thought for this. So we had our videographer kind of zoom in on the people's face, and then we had another thing kind of over the shoulder watching their hands, you know, and the faculty kind of like did the experiments that way. And we got some really high quality videos that we own now, so we can use those in a lot of different ways whenever we come back. And the students really appreciated the effort that the professors created to actually make this happen. We also used time lapse for longer things so they could see what the chemical reactions were doing. It's kind of labor intensive, but like I said before, it wound up being really high quality. And since it is so time intensive, we weren't able to respond to every single faculty's need for this. So a lot of faculty chose to still go this route and develop it themselves. And they used a cell phone to record video and that kind of thing. It wasn't as slick, but the cell phones actually do have good cameras. So they were able to actually get some usable videos. Faculty were concerned about attendance. And I noticed there were a bunch of questions on that pre-survey questionnaire about assessments and that kind of thing. So the assessments for this type of thing was typically quizzes and assignments, and then using the typical Canvas tools that you would use. Tom, if you want to go to the next one with the virtual experiments. If you've never used this before, these are like video games that the students play, but instead of chasing bad guys around, what they do is they're doing science labs, and they're like mixing, they have like a virtual guy on the screen who's like mixing chemicals. Or I noticed there were some A&P professors here. So they're looking at pictures of brains and livers and hearts, and they can actually like get into them and open them up and see the inside, which is pretty cool. We definitely had some mixed experiences with this and variances in the lab quality and support, even within a third-party provider, which makes sense when you think about textbook publishers and that kind of thing. So there's definitely room for growth in this area, and growth to be expected, especially as the COVID situation is fluid. I would definitely expect moderate investment in these virtual experiments, and especially if the situation continues for an extended period of time. There's a lot to like with virtual experiments. We'll just stay there for one quick more second. There's a lot to like with virtual experiments because they're interactive and they mirror the video games that students are playing and that kind of thing. But there's also a lot to consider, including that there could be costs for students, and the faculty and students prefer graphics, which is consistent with other multimedia research. I'm sorry, they prefer real pictures instead of graphics, which is consistent with other multimedia research. They also said, faculty and students also said it was tough to really understand how it feels, thickness and other senses, but there are some good OER for each of this category and the previous one on our handout. If you want to check that out in those aggregated lists, there's some good kind of free ones that we have there. And then to answer the question about assessments for these, they're actually built into the software for the ones that you pay for. So it'll spit out a grade based on how the student did. The third part of this cone of experience was live experiments, if we want to go down to that next slide. And these are actual labs that you send home to the students. And these definitely, obviously, because it's physical materials, do have some cost for the students. And there's two ways to approach this. One is DIY, which is like, it's kind of a take-home project. We had some professors doing that. An example was in nursing, the professor went on Amazon, bought some suture kits, sent them home to the students, and they practiced on grapes and bananas and oranges and a bunch of different things like that. There's another professor who used Field Trip and did pictures and that kind of thing. You definitely want to consider safety and other legal ramifications with your university before you do this, but we did have some good experiences with this. And there's a whole nother one with companies like Carolina and Hands-On Labs that will create this for you and send it to you. But they come with safety precautions too. So that's kind of a nice thing about that. And they come with digital curriculum. So the kind of the last consideration to make with the live experiments was, do you want to do them synchronously or asynchronously? An advantage of synchronous is you can answer questions and provide formative feedback in real time. An advantage of asynchronous is you get all the benefits of the asynchronous learning in other areas, and the students really appreciate that. So I'm just gonna, oh, and the assessments with this are just like what you do in a regular class. So I'm gonna end with kind of a funny story here of a student who had, we did a take-home kit, one of the kind that you buy, and they had agar, which is like the little gelatin. It's basically just Jell-O. But they were doing it themselves asynchronously at home at like 11:30 at night, and they spilled some on their hand and had a total freak out party. And they were like, am I going to die? Am I going to lose my hand? They're frantically emailing the professor, and the professor's like, I'm pretty sure you'll be fine. It's basically just Jell-O, but if you need an emergency, go home. So I wanted to share that story with you, just to kind of end of, you guys are doing great by coming and doing all the things that you're doing with this. Regardless of what you decide to do, as with in class, everything may or may not go perfectly, but a little positive attitude and general flexibility like that professor, and I know you guys are going to do a great job and totally do a great job.
Thank you, Bryan. Let's have a very brief Q&A session with Bryan. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute your microphone or type in the Q&A area. And by the way, Bryan, Carol just asked you a question. How did you go about prioritizing faculty requests for this kind of support?
I saw that one. I like that one. One thing was that we definitely wanted to talk with the professor to, number one, make sure that we would meet their needs the best and have that conversation, because if they could meet their learning objectives a different way better, then we wanted to kind of like guide them into what they might like better. But we definitely also wanted to prioritize videos that we knew, like I said, we could use in other things. So if it could be a pre-lab, that we could use it in the future for a pre-lab or in place of the lab, or to cut class time and kind of continue to use it after COVID, that was definitely a priority.
Jamie asked any suggestions for labs that require two people, such as a student performing a bed to wheelchair transfer of a patient.
Right. So that definitely sounds like something that you'd, if you're transferring somebody from a wheelchair and some of those kind of things, I would look to see if there was something that you could do to partner people with people that they're quarantining themselves with. So in other words, could they take one turn doing the one thing and the other person that they're quarantining with does the other one, and the other person doesn't do it perfectly, but they just do it enough that this person can focus on what they're doing, and then they switch sides. So the other person, who's maybe, you know, the person's brother or whoever, you know, spouse or whatever, does the same thing on the other side, so they don't do it perfectly, but this person gets practice with it. And at least that's a way that you can physically get them doing the physical things and partnering with the people they're quarantined with and still accomplishing those learning objectives. Great question.
Well, thank you, Bryan. I noticed a few colleagues also asked more questions in Q&A area. How about this? Let's just move to our second panelist and guest speaker's presentation. And Bryan, you feel free to answer our colleagues' questions in Q&A by typing. And also, let me remind you, after the presentations, we will have a Q&A and discussion segment as well. So you can keep asking your questions that way. Thank you so much for your understanding and support. Let's move to our second guest speaker and panelist, Christine. Christine, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to kind of piggyback on Bryan's presentation. We had somewhat of a similar approach. I want to start off, this is a video that we put together from our kind of a compilation of our labs that we worked on. If you wouldn't mind, Tom, playing that. So I'll be happy to put this in the chat too. I'll find our YouTube channel and put it in there.
I have it. I'm doing it right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, I hope everybody can see the link.
So as you can see, we used a variety of technology with all of our lab courses. And really what I wanted to talk about today is we kind of flipped our entire process upside down. So probably like typical other instructional design and learning design groups, you know, we're used to completely customized approach, right? For us, we get the amount of courses that we're going to develop within a semester, which is usually our development cycle. And we say, okay, we meet one-on-one with those faculty members. We go through this very comprehensive process of developing fully online courses. It takes us weeks and weeks and weeks, an entire semester to do, and we're coming up with customized approaches to all of their instructional challenges. But like everybody else, when COVID hit in spring, you know, we had to come up with some really quick solutions, and then also looked at what are we going to do for the summer as well. When we're talking about, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of faculty instead of our, you know, normally we work with 50 to 60 faculty member within a semester. So what we decided to do, instead of addressing every single faculty member's individual needs, is really depend on one of our faculty members to lead up this faculty-led, multidisciplinary, collaborative task force. That was a lot. So we actually grabbed Dr. Johnny Elradi, which is in this lower left-hand window here, and really leaned on him. He is our representative to the online STEM group that UF holds. And he was just absolutely our best partner in this. And what he was able to do is bring all of the faculty from all of the different disciplines within our College of Arts and Sciences together to start off with, okay, as a collective group, what are your challenges? How can we work together to solve these challenges? And ultimately, what do you need? Meaning, do we need to have vendors? Do we need to look at what vendors are available that we could purchase custom content for? What are other challenges that you have? And that allowed us to kind of assign our learning designers to this faculty task force to then work together with them in a collective group to make some really strategic decisions. And what we decided to do out of that is use vendors like Jove and Pivot and Labster, iNaturalist. We also did custom kits for some biology students. We also were able to shoot custom video, but in doing this in kind of a shared experience with a group of faculty and lab managers and GAs, over the spring when we couldn't physically get in there and shoot the experiments ourselves with our video production team, we had to leverage the GAs and faculty who are already in the labs and kind of get them trained up on how to shoot themselves. And then we established this process where they would send us the video footage and then we would edit it and go back and forth. But to do that in the shared experience was so impactful because what we learned quickly, we could share with the other faculty members and make immediate changes on the fly and get everybody trained up at the same time. So, you know, moving into the future, we're establishing the same group for the fall of faculty champions, if you will, as practitioners and subject matter experts. But now we're including people even more cross-discipline. So bringing in engineering and health and other areas to also, you know, establish this community of practice to make decisions collectively and allow us to be more strategic about how we're supporting everybody on a one-to-one basis. So kind of stuff that we've learned out of that is to keep it simple. You know, we ended up meeting once a week with the faculty and the lab managers and the learning design team to make that work. But then having very distinct tasks that everybody was responsible for and very distinct outcomes, because we started off, it took a couple weeks and we were just talking and talking and nothing was happening. So we had to really make some quick decisions on what exactly we wanted to leverage. And then looking at the fall, we're going to, again, continue that, but then, you know, really be able to work off of what we've learned, pick up the pace a little bit, and make these things happen. You know, I'm sure everybody else's experience with working with vendors and using custom content, it takes a really long time to get cut through the bureaucracy and create contracts and actually start leveraging the content. So at least we're in front of that now. We already have a robust content set that we're you know, able to use for the fall, which has been great. And that's really all I have. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Christine.
I see the one, are there any considerations on liability issues for take-home labs? We did do the kits as well, so yes, that was definitely a topic. We took that to general counsel and just made sure we did all of our checks and balances with that. I know that we also used Carolina, which I think Bryan used as well, and they kind of have some protocol in place to solve that we worked with them to make sure that everything was above board.
By the way, Christine, I noticed Bev asked the question in chat. Did you need to establish contracts with all these vendors, job, world, those vendors?
So yes, we did have to establish the contracts. And, you know, we had a whole separate team. Basically, I was feeding them within Innovative Ed, who specializes in contract negotiation, if you will. They leveraged Dr. Elroddy's talents and kind of went into it full force. But that was by far the most frustrating part, is negotiating and waiting for those contracts to go through, because as you can imagine, anything with technology and Canvas integration doesn't just take contracts, right, and a financial decision, but it takes all of the LTI integration with Canvas, which is another IT leap that we had to go against. But it ended up working out, and we made it in time for the summer semester.
Thank you, Christine. Judith asked, how did you handle accessibility issues?
A lot of the vendors that we use have at least captioning in there, you know, and I know all the learning designers that are on here rolling their eyes, because we all know that accessibility isn't just about captioning. So I do apologize for that. But a lot of the vendors do have some kind of accessibility measures in there. For obviously anything that we develop is completely accessible, and that goes from, you know, contrast to header tags to every use in Canvas that we have. But all of our custom videos, we use the Kaltura platform, which has been absolutely amazing. We upload all of our content to Kaltura, which gets auto transcribes. We also have a vendor that does human transcriptioning, and Kaltura also offers interactive transcriptioning, which has been really helpful, you know, to allow the students to navigate to different parts within the video as they need.
Thank you, Christine. Let's welcome Debra. Would you please take over? Thanks.
Hi, everyone. So if we bring up my first slide. So I'm coming from the perspective of where do I find these resources? I'm that IT person that Christine wants to partner with and work with. We're the ones that help make it available on the learning management system. And so what I'm started with here is just being aware of what your learning management system already has. So your fully online instructors and people who are using your online resources a lot may be aware of what's there, and they may not be aware of everything. They may just be aware of what they use. So you can reach out to your LMS administrators and find out exactly what is available on your system already. You're not reinventing the wheel. Here at Dade College, we have the Center for Instructional and Organizational Learning. That's our technology training team. They're another great resource of what's available, not only what's available, but then the pedagogy. How do I use it? Is it effective? Who else is using it? Can you help partner you with another instructor? So they're a great resource. Librarians and your learning resource specialists, you know, in Bryan's first slide there, he showed the videos of what's going on. And the videos can be a great tool to give the students an overview of what that learning objective is or that concept is for that particular lab for that day. And the video can give them an overview as you go into then the actual practice and work. So the learning resource specialists are going to be a great resource. And lab managers and faculty themselves, what the lab managers may be tapped into what's going on with other resources that weren't really needed before. COVID and now can be instrumental in helping the students achieve some of those learning objectives that they would need for their labs. The last bullet I have here is publishers and third-party vendors. So your textbooks, what do they have? How can you leverage any of that? Do they have additional resources that are lab specific? And then one bullet that came to my mind that didn't get in here on the slide is also reaching out to your professional organizations. I made some notes here to remind myself, but like your National Association of Agricultural Educators, if you're interested in animal science, if you're teaching in that subject area. Also the American Society of Animal Science, American Chemical Society. I just did a Google search the other day just to see what's out there available for free based on some of the pre-conference questions that I was seeing. And there's a lot of really great resources content make available to you guys post the conference. So that's another excellent resource. So now I'm going to show you a little bit. So we had a lab manager reached out to me directly because they know that I'm one of the LMS administrators. And so the next slide is going to show you this particular tool is going to help in the arts and science, or the A in STEAM, right? So this was discovering resources internal and external. This particular program, it's called Aurelia and Musician, and it teaches 2 different music concepts, and the lab manager reached out to me directly, and we partnered together to fast track getting this LTI integration with the LMS. Normally, our integration process takes a full semester, and we add new tools during the semester break, because if it's a building block or a Blackboard campus, if it's a building block, the system has to be restarted. So our process is to do all new tools during the break. However, with COVID, we didn't have that luxury, so we fast-tracked everything. And if Tom can just click here on the YouTube link, it'll show you a little bit about what Aurelia and Musician provides for our students in music and music theory.
Introducing Section 6, Training and Music Theory Program.
It doesn't seem like the audio is coming through, but they have fabulous music. And so it's 2 pieces. It's ear training and sight reading as well. And it provides the students opportunities to practice, to learn the theory. It does have quizzing built in back to it. And then the instructor can go in and select what they need the students to cover for a particular lesson. It's not going to be packaged for your specific lab course. It's just the entire product line, and so you can go in and select the different things that that particular learning objective for that lab needs to cover. And so the next slide I want to show you is our medical campus reached out to me, and they needed to be able to have our nurses students finish their clinicals for springtime, and also our PA students. And they found this product called iHuman, and iHuman is a virtual patient software application. And so what happens is the links are embedded into the Blackboard course. They click on the link and it takes them into the iHuman area. The particular course selects from a log of patient interactions and cases, which cases are needed for those labs and those learning experiences. So the instructors have that information from their lead instructor on that course. And when the student goes into the lab, they'll walk in, they'll see a patient, as you see the lady on your left, they'll see the patient, you'll see the charts. The students can take the patient's vitals, you can hear the heartbeat, you can take the pulse. You're not actually touching the person, but you are activating the different tools that you would need to pick up and use if you were actually in a live interaction with an actual patient. And then I actually participated in the training on this just to have a better understanding for support. And one side of it, what the students use and how the students use it. And then there's a whole rich area for the instructor to see what the student's performance is. And you see that in the performance overview section of the slide. And the instructor not only can see how the student performed the tasks that were required for that particular patient interaction, but iHuman also gave our faculty an overview and an understanding. Is my student actually going in and participating in the lab, or are they clicking through and getting a positive result? And so they shared with them some of the tools that are built into iHuman, where the instructor can say, yes, I can see the students really engaged with the work and what's going on, versus they're clicking through and actually having a positive result. We can play a little bit of the video and see a little bit of what happens here. It starts out as an overview, and we're jumping in perfect at 3:37. So at the beginning of this video, it's more of how iHuman works. This is actually a training video. It's, as you see, 43 minutes long, that an instructor can be accessing at their own time to see an overview. And yeah, you can play it because I don't think audio is coming through. So here you see you get the stats for the patient, their age, their height, their basic information, and then what's happening. So we're going to do elective total knee replacement. And then as this goes through, it takes you through a practice case, and they have everything from pregnancy, pediatrics, all the way through geriatrics in terms of the cases. And here you see what the student's going to be expected to do. And then from the student's perspective, they have tutorials before they actually get into the case. They have support through iHuman directly on how to use the tools, as well as the support videos that the instructor can provide. And so those are two big examples of a fast track that we did at Miami-Dade College to support the end of spring activity that needed to be done. We also fast tracked about 8 or 9 other building block tools into the LMS for other faculty, and these came from a variety of places. One of the things that we did in terms of faculty support overall is we partnered with our library team, and they created LibGuides. They created a full LibGuide for our faculty, and they created another LibGuide for students on remote learning. And so with NBC Online and fully online, our classes, of course, were ready, and we were remote. We didn't have those issues. But what we did is we definitely jumped in there and supported our college overall in helping faculty teach face-to-face, faculty teach enhanced, and blended as well. What is it going to be now that we're fully remote? And so for the summer, we provided copies of our master courses that were going to be offered for the summer. We put those in a Blackboard org and zip files, and faculty could go in, and if they were teaching a particular class that we were offering through our master course model, they could download that content into their class shelf for the term and teach their class. We had some provisions. We had to use our proctored exams the way our proctored exams were developed and designed, or don't use it at all. You didn't have to use it, but if you're going to use it, you have to use it within the criteria we set up for NBC Online, so that we could maintain the integrity of both the exam and our NBC Online process. So that's one thing that we did in support of faculty. And our ID team, who normally doesn't deal necessarily with faculty at large, they deal with an individual course developer, they also became a part of the support team for all other faculty as well. We set up Microsoft Teams, and we used booking so people could book time with the designer when they were available. And this gave the designer time to map out, like at office hours, you can reach me during these hours for support. And we leveraged our support both with our CIOL team and with our design team to support faculty in remote. Now we're getting ready for fall. So, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Debra. Let's move to our panelist, Vicki Westergard. Vicki, would you please take over? Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Tom. So at St. Petersburg College, our transition from face-to-face to online in the spring was, well, it was a very quick turnaround. We had about 2 days between the time the college decided that we would move things to online that were previously face-to-face. And so, as you might guess, it was very decentralized. Our academic deans and chairs really encouraged faculty to collaborate with their peers on possible solutions. Our instructional technology support team was definitely, it was all hands on deck with everyone. They took, I don't know, a couple thousand calls within the first week, I think. Our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning was also very involved, and between that group and our support group, They did a lot of just-in-time webinars for people to get them up to speed. Our instructional design team also, which was used to being in a position of working on very strategic course design, had to jump in and do some things as well. So there were some ideas that faculty tried, and of course there was no time for us to consult on everything, that were not exactly as successful as they wanted and weren't carried over into online classes. For example, a couple of faculty that were teaching online or face-to-face science labs decided that they would try to do some experiments, filming themselves doing them, then giving the raw data to students and asking the students to watch the video and write up lab reports. That wasn't their favorite thing. It wasn't as engaging as Bryan spoke of the cone. Really, it was very low in engagement. But some of the strategies that our faculty tried and that they thought were good for themselves and for students, and by the way, we wanted our faculty to be able to be comfortable with the tools that we were using, which is another reason we kind of gave them a little more free rein in what they were doing. So you'll see here a video demonstration for ceramics. So Kim Kirchman filmed herself using her own home camera, which was very nice, creating a mug for ceramics instruction. And we'll go ahead and, if you want to play a little of that, if it will play. If not, so we can watch it a little bit and we won't hear Kim, but I'm sure that we can share. It looks like Tom has already shared that video. I wanted him to show at least to the part where she had a torch, because I figure any class where you can use a torch is a little more exciting, right? So what happened with those was the faculty and the chairs in fine arts got together and put together kits from materials that they would already have for the classroom. And because we knew that these were students who were in a face-to-face environment, we knew they were local. We had them drive through one of the parking lots by the Fine Arts Building and pick up these kits to be able to do things at home. So they could watch this video of Kim. And the advantage to this, as opposed to like a Zoom, is they could rewatch the video if they needed to while they were doing their own project. I'll just tell you that, this was in the very early days of our shutdown, and we were all a little bit stressed. I watched the whole video. It was very relaxing, and I don't even do ceramics, so I highly recommend it if you need a little stress relief. You'll see, as many other people have talked about Jove, we had, through FLVC and some of the state resources, we had access to Jove, and our library services had gone ahead and gotten full licenses for that so that we could use those. Those were used in some biology classes. In microbiology class, you'll see in a minute, one of the instructors created some lab assignments to be used with home kits. We'll talk about that in a minute. We were very fortunate for A&P that we had already worked with one of our faculty members on building an online A&P lab course. And so you'll be able to see just a little bit of simulations that we built. Our instructional design team built simulations of various things. Again, not as good as doing it yourself, but it did do the job in getting them through the learning objectives. And so that was the point. And the final at-home lab was for BSc 2011. That's Biology 2, Organisms and Ecology. And you'll see a little bit of that video, hopefully. All right. I know this is small, and I think Tom's going to share these slides with you, and you can look more closely. So this was from the microbiology class. Students completed a variety of assignments. This one They got information on hand washing, which is so relevant during COVID, right? Everybody needs to learn how to wash their hands. And they were to then create some sort of flyer or video. If you'll go to the next slide, there's an example of one of the flyers. There's a little video. We won't play that right now, but you're welcome to use that if you really want to learn how to thoroughly wash your hands. It also is very calming. If you go to the next slide, for staining techniques, they obviously couldn't do staining in the lab, but they were able to create guides for that as well. They watched a demo. Of course, they had to read some in the book. They watched the demo, and then they created their own staining guide. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see an example of a couple of those staining guides, which I thought were very impressive. They look really nice. If you go on to the next, this one was for DNA extraction, so a little more active fun. If you can read the instructions, basically they're advised to get some fruit and do various things. It looks like that one is almost a strawberry daiquiri, but anyway, they were able to go through and do the work, and they submitted pictures, and some of them also submitted videos. And if you go on to the next one, that was about microbes. Microbiology is the passion of this particular instructor. And again, I know this font is pretty small, but someone had asked about the liability. So this was via kits from Carolina Biological. Those kits are about $30 a piece. They were covered by the lab fees, so students didn't have to really pay extra, and we were able to get them sent right to their homes. There is the first step of this whole experiment at home was to fill out the liability form, let's see, I think they called it the lab safety agreement. So they wanted to make sure that the students were up to speed on that. I believe there's also a video that talks about lab safety earlier in the class. Then they were able to take the agar plates. They learned how to melt and pour the agar into the plates. And then in a nightmare scenario for germaphobes, they learned how to take samples from themselves, their computer, their homes, I think even their children in some cases, and find out what kind of microbes they were living with. So that was kind of an overview of that class. I think the student satisfaction in that class was very high, and they got to do a lot of great experiments and things at home. This is a very engaging instructor, so she actually also often has her young daughter in the videos with her. She is her assistant. So, all right, if we'll go on to the next one. This hopefully will play. I tried to do a little sample for you all so you could see kind of how this worked. This was from the AMP class that, as I mentioned before, we built this class as an online class. And so many of the face-to-face instructors also picked up these things. This is a little piece of a pH determination lab. As you can see, we used Articulate Storyline to build this. So they take it'll repeat if you missed the beginning of it. They take these 3 pieces of pH paper, they drag them into the acid, into the base, and into the unknown. And then they go ahead and match up and determine the pH of each one and enter it. And it gives them feedback if it's correct. I didn't go through the whole thing, but I did get the first one right, so I quit while I was ahead. And if you'll go to the last one then, Tom. So we had a faculty member teaching biology 2, as I mentioned before, organisms and ecology, and they were supposed to do a dissection of a rat. And I think I saw somebody else had rat kits at home. So this instructor actually did a live Zoom meeting for this particular one. and she did 6 students at a time. And so you can see some pictures here, but she actually was able to guide them through, and this is a little of the video, which clearly we can't hear right now, but that can be shared as well. So they go into, she can see all the cameras from the students that are on with her, and they can watch her, and she is able to observe the work that they do, give them guidance, and take them through that particular exercise. And again, that was something that had very high student satisfaction, and I think served all the students well. And hopefully they cleaned their kitchen tables or wherever they did it really, really well after that. All right, so this is a sampling of some of the solutions that we used. Faculty engagement and creativity was really, really high and continues to be really high. Clearly it was a stressful time for everybody. But we, this summer, we created a new training for teaching live online. That's a modality that we decided to use because we know that we have students, we heard back from them who are not very comfortable in the online environment. They really prefer face-to-face, and not only that, they feel that their success rates are much better when they're in a face-to-face environment. So most of our faculty are using Zoom to conduct those live synchronous class meetings. And so our training, Teaching Live Online at SPC, which we just released recently, it actually goes into kind of how to make decisions on how you're going to organize your class meetings. And one of the faculty members who just took that training is someone who has done a lot of online instruction in the past, as well as face-to-face instruction. And she recently shared with me that she liked the training. She felt she got a lot of out of it. But the thing that really surprised her was it caused her to think differently about the way she teaches her face-to-face classes and her in-person classes as opposed to synchronous live online. And, I think basically the epiphany that she had is something that's come from other training that we've had. I know sometimes faculty are reluctant to go through training, but many of them report after they've done so that they learned a lot out of it, even though they were skeptical that they would. So I'll wrap up by saying not all solutions are viable if you're trying things out. There's lots of different options and places to find things. As Bryan and everyone else mentioned, there are plenty of options out there that are kind of pricey. So we try to be careful with our students for that. But basically empowering your faculty to look at things from a different perspective can really have unexpected and positive outcomes and consequences. So I think that's all for me, and I'll take questions if you have it. And I see that Bev also mentions, we love it when an instructor says that what they learned about online teaching will help them in their face-to-face. When we first went to Quality Matters as our standard for developing online classes, we had a couple of faculty members who said, we should use this same process for our face-to-face classes. And that was about 5 years ago. And I think Quality Matters has been working on a structure, I guess, for face-to-face classes as well in that time. So any other questions?
Excuse me, Vicki. Wendy asked, is the teaching live online at SPC available to view?
It is actually in our D2L environment, so you have to be able to log in to see it. It is not publicly available, but we could probably put together some information about what the topics are if you're interested in that, if you find that that would be helpful. But it's not publicly available right now.
Thank you, Vicki.
Yeah, thank you.
Melissa asked a question. She asked, can you share more information about the training you developed for synchronous live online courses?
Right, so that would be the live online. So part of what's in that training is a way to help faculty decide what to do in that actual online meeting. Just because you have an hour scheduled for an online class, and we do schedule those. They show up like a face-to-face class, but they are online, and instructors or faculty members expect their students to actually be online during that time. So one thing is, what do you do for that hour or 2 hours or sometimes even 3 hours? It's not always that you want to just stand there and talk to people. In fact, we don't recommend that. But there are other ways to engage students. And so part of what we've done, and I can share a URL in the window here in just a second, that gives them some feedback on, you know, things that they might consider as they're starting to look at different choices that they might make, whether they're going to do discussions or breakouts, because, you know, if you've used Zoom, there's a nice option for breakout rooms in Zoom. And, you know, there are a lot of different ways that you can conduct your class that aren't just you standing up and talking. So I just shared that URL. It's a resource page that we offer for faculty. There's a lot of other things on there. It is publicly available, so you're welcome to look around in there if you wish.
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you, everybody.